Well, hey there, Mama, and welcome back to the Mom's Overcoming Overwhelm podcast, episode number 235. I'm Emily McDermott, and I'm here beside you on this journey as we work together to declutter your home, head, and heart. Today, we are going to be diving into the 6 reasons that people hold on to stuff. And so we're at episode 235. If you've listened to more than one, you may have noticed that I really like using acronyms. And I came up with one which is kind of weird, but the acronym is Muppet. Yes, Muppet. Very, very strange. However, it does describe these 6 reasons. So we're going to dive into those and also how we can start letting go when we're having trouble because we're holding on due to these 6 reasons. So I'm also going to have a bunch of related episodes for you. Make sure to check out the show notes where you can find all of that information. And make sure you also grab your notebook and pen, and let's dive into today's episode. Hey Mama, are you tired of your cluttered home and mile-long to-do lists but are too overwhelmed to know where to start? Do you lack the time and motivation and don't think you'll ever conquer the clutter? You're in the right place. I'm Emily, wife, boy mom, and declutter coach who has overcome the overwhelm in my own life through decluttering and simplifying. I believe every mom deserves the peace that comes from a clutter-free home. Ready to get your life back? Let's declutter your home, head, and heart together. If you are listening to today's episode, did you know that I have a YouTube channel? Now, don't get too excited. I do not have a YouTube studio in my house and probably never will, but it is the video version of me doing the podcast. So I'm just here today. I'm in my son's room and just talking to you all and sharing all this. So if you prefer a video format instead of audio, then you can go ahead, check out the show notes for that link, or just go to YouTube and search Simple by Emmy, and you will find me there. All right, we have a lot to get through today. Very exciting. So like I said, this is that kind of strange Muppet acronym, but we're going to dive in. And then for each of these, I'm going to have some questions you can ask yourself to help you kind of get unstuck when it comes to the reasons we hold on. So number 1, we have our M, and that stands for memories. Of course, memories is one of the main reasons that we hold on to things, especially sentimental items. A lot of times we equate the item with the memory that it evokes. And so as we're trying to figure out, should I be holding on to this because it is something that reminds me of something, but perhaps we have a lot of sentimental stuff and it's causing issues for us because it's just too much. We need to ask ourselves a couple of questions to see whether it's something that we want to hold on to. And this is something that I would do with you as a client if we were in person. So question number 1 is, does this reflect a positive memory, or am I just holding on to it because it's old? So sentimental means it's evoking a positive memory. Sometimes we hold on to things just because we think we're supposed to. And an example of this from my own life is my yearbook. I actually wrote an article a long time ago called Why I Threw Away My Yearbook or something to that effect. And still, if you Google, should I throw away my yearbook? It's one of the search results that come up. And people are very kind of adamant, like, no, you should never throw away your yearbook. Well, to be fair, I did end up scanning some of the pages, but I pretty much was holding on to it because I'm like, well, it's your yearbook. You're supposed to hold on to it. But high school was not the happiest time for me. So really, I was holding on to it just because it was old and not because it had an actual sentimental value to me. So asking that is an important one. And then number 2, do I need to keep the physical thing, or would a photo with a story attached suffice? So a lot of times we're holding on to something that evokes a memory, but we wouldn't need the physical thing. So an example of this could be kids' artwork. I know a lot of moms that have a ton of their kids' artwork and they're like, oh, I'm going to make it into a book someday. So then it ends up being kind of like aspirational clutter too. However, it's like, well, it's something that the kids made, so I have to keep it all. Well, there are ways of doing things as far as like, okay, you could send it off to be made into a book. if you didn't have the time to do it yourself, or you can just scan it with your phone. That's what I do with my kids' artwork. And so that way you do have it digitally, but you don't have to keep the physical thing. So just knowing, and that can go for things that it's not artwork as well. If you have a baby blanket or something where your kids are long past the baby stage, you could still take a picture of the baby blanket and then have a story attached. You can actually, in most photo apps, there's an info section where you can write something about it. And that way the story stays with the thing, even if you are getting rid of the physical item. So the third question is, if I keep it, do I have a thoughtful place and way to display it? Because we don't want all of our sentimental items just collecting dust in boxes. That doesn't do anyone any good. It just means when we move, we end up moving stuff we don't need, or if we pass, then our loved ones have to figure out like, what is this thing and was it important? So being able to thoughtfully curate and keep things that are most important and then be able to use and display them is the ideal situation. And you can learn more about this in episode 11, which I do completely about sentimental items. And as a reminder, all of these episodes will be linked in the show notes today. So that's M, memories. Now we're going to move on to U, which is utility. Meaning is something that we have simply because it performs some sort of function and we're using it. This is a wonderful reason to hold on to things. This is probably the most important reason to hold on to things because we actually use it. However, right, there's always a but. Sometimes our perception of what we regularly use isn't accurate. We have kind of these rose-colored glasses about how much we've actually used it. And so it's helpful to kind of reflect and ask ourselves some questions to see, is it something useful that I'm actually using, or is it something more that's aspirational clutter, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So some questions to ask yourself for this would be, have I used this in the last 6 months? And do I think I'm going to use it in the next 6 months? Now, you could do 3 months or so. Just recognize that a lot of things are seasonal. So obviously, sometimes it doesn't make sense to review things until you are actually using them. For example, Christmas or holiday decor. If you go ahead and get everything out, and then you recognize, oh, yeah, there are several things that I didn't use this year that I didn't use last year. Then you know that you haven't used them for the last like 1 or 2 Christmases, and you can let that go. But sometimes it might be an item of clothing, or perhaps it's a book that you said that you were going to read and it's been 6 months and you still haven't read it. Perhaps you can donate that to the local library and then borrow it from the library when you're ready. Number 2, the second question is this a just in case item or a just for when item? Now, the just for when concept is something from the minimalists, and it is that we have an actual determined time that we are going to use said thing. So let's say that you regularly go camping and you have camping gear in your garage, then you know that's a just for when we go camping next. And that's a perfect example of that. But if it's just in case, like you've never, ever done a certain hobby, and yet you have the items to support it in your house, or you thought, oh, I really want to get into, I don't even know, snorkeling. Just making this up. And so you bought like all the snorkeling gear, and then maybe you went once and you're like, oh, I really don't actually enjoy that. But you're wanting to keep it just in case I change my mind, or just in case the kids want to get into it. Then that might be a reason to potentially let it go. The third question is there something else I have that can perform this same function so that I don't need this anymore? So one example that comes to mind is perhaps you have a toaster and then you get one of these multi-function air fryer things like we have, where it bakes and it toasts and it does bagel and air fryer and all these different things. Obviously, then that renders the toaster obsolete because you have something that does that. So this happens a lot in the kitchen. It would probably happen maybe in some other categories as well, but just recognizing like okay, I have something that does this already. Do I need to have the duplicate? And most likely the answer is no. So taking this functionality first approach with your stuff and saying, how does this support my life right now and my goals and my vision, then that's really helpful to know whether you are actually using it or whether it's something you could let go. And for this, I recommend going to episode 15. It's all about 3 words sabotaging your decluttering efforts. And spoiler alert, those 3 words are just in case. So now we had memories, we had utility. Now we're moving on to the first P in Muppet. So strange, I know, which is possibility. So this is like, oh, I could use this or I might use this. So this is more of our aspirational clutter where we're saying, oh, I might use that someday. So I think about aspirational clutter as reflecting the me that could be. So it's the stuff that represents who we could be or who we would be or who we were in a prior season when we had all of the unlimited time and energy to do the things that probably now as a busy mom, we don't really have the time to do. And actually, it's the stuff that sometimes like mocks us in our house, reminding you of all the things that you're not doing. And I do have an episode about aspirational clutter, but I am reminded of a recent episode that you can search for with Katie Jo Wells. And she was talking about cookbooks. That's a huge one where you get a cookbook thinking you are going to host or make certain meals and you never do. And she also gives a great example of running shoes, where she thought she was going to run and then she wasn't running, and then it was just kind of mocking her from her closet. So the main culprits for aspirational clutter are clothing, books, hobby or sports equipment, crafting supplies, cookbooks, kitchen equipment. They're the things that you thought you might use. Maybe it's the clothes that used to fit you that you want to fit into again. But here are some questions that you can ask yourself to see whether it makes sense to hold on to these items. The first one is, does this item reflect my current season of life, or is it making me feel bad about what I'm not doing right now? I've given this example in the past, but when I had my second son, I suffered from postpartum anxiety. And I ended up buying these coloring books that were supposed to be adult stress relieving coloring books. And I had those and my colored pencils. And the problem was I never wanted to do them. And the thought of actually doing them was stressing me out when it was supposed to be the antidote to my stress. So then I ended up letting them go because it was just an aspirational thing that was making me feel bad about myself. And so I knew that they had to go. The second question is, can I let someone else enjoy this right now, knowing that I can always get this book again or pick up this hobby at another time? So perhaps you have a lot of scrapbooking stuff and you're just not really in the place to do scrapbooking and you just feel horrible because you've been wanting to do these baby books forever and you just haven't ever done them. Could you maybe through your Buy Nothing group perhaps gift some of those scrapbooking supplies, and then later on when you feel like you're able to do it again, you're able to pick it back up? And you know, the great thing about Buy Nothing groups is you can actually request things from your community. So a lot of times we don't want to let go of some of these aspirational things because of what we paid for it, but it is possible through something like a Buy Nothing group, or even asking for things for Mother's Day or for your birthday or for Christmas, for example, that you wouldn't have to pay for things again. So that might help you let go more easily. The third question is for clothing specifically. Once I potentially fit back into this size, will I really want to wear this piece of clothing, or am I going to want to buy something new? Most likely, you're going to want to buy something new, like a pair of jeans, instead of saying, oh, I think I want to wear the jeans that I wore 15 years ago. Now, there are exceptions. Sometimes we have these favorite pieces of clothing, but by and large, if we actually lose the weight that we've gained, we want to go out and get something new. So just keeping that in mind when you're looking at clothing. Okay, so we've done memories, utility, and possibility. Number 4 is pleasure. Okay, sometimes we keep stuff because it literally as Marie Kondo would say, sparks joy. It doesn't necessarily serve any utilitarian purpose, and that's okay. So when people have me to their home and they're like, oh, well, I have this collection or I keep this, I never judge, because you may be keeping something just because it makes you happy, and that's totally fine. But there are some things to consider. You want to make sure that you are doing 3 things when it comes to keeping things that make you happy. Number 1, it might be that you need to contain it, which means that you need to have like a physical limit around the thing. Sometimes we see this with collections where you might have like figurines. And sure, if you have one surface that has some figurines that are very thoughtfully displayed, that's one thing. But if you have a collection that's taking over your house and you don't have room for anything else, then that can be a problem. Number 2 is to display it. Again, we're curating, we're kind of artfully displaying things rather than keeping everything in boxes or having so much that we have to keep the majority of things in boxes. And the third part is not just simply buying it because of the pleasure or dopamine hit that you get. So we want to be buying things that will be bringing us lasting pleasure rather than just buying something just because it's on sale or just because we had a bad day or those types of things. So we have a lot of episodes on the podcast about intentional purchasing. And one of my favorites is episode 86 with Megan Dwyer from Money Isn't Scary, all about values-based spending strategies. So again, all of these will be linked in the show notes. Okay, so now we're on to letter E, which is expectations. And primarily it's our expectations, but mostly our perceived expectations that others place on us. So this is where we should keep it because of fear or guilt, or we should keep it because everyone else has one, or it's just what you do, kind of like the yearbook example, or perhaps it's how much we paid for it. It's the expectation that because I paid so much for it, I have to keep it, or I have to keep it because my family member gave it to me and it's a gift. We put all of these expectations on ourselves, which aren't actually true, but they're just stories that we are telling ourselves. So ways to get unstuck from this particular reason that we hold on to things is to ask yourself a couple questions. One of them is, this is from the minimalist as well. If this were to spontaneously combust, how would I feel? So if you're thinking about a family heirloom, which really isn't your style, but is like in your home that you feel like you can't get rid of, how would you feel if it just disappeared? Most likely you would feel relief and you would feel happy. And that's a clue that you might want to let it go. Similar to this is, would I move this? Would I wrap it in bubble wrap and pack it to move it? Which is actually interesting because we are planning a move to Pittsburgh in the summer, and I'm asking myself that question. The military is actually doing the packing and moving for us, but still, do I actually want to unpack this once I get to another home? So that's a second question. And when it comes to how much we paid for something, can I recognize that, yes, I paid a lot of money for this, but also I don't want to keep it and keep paying for it with maintaining it and knowing where it is and, dusting it or dusting around it. Like, we can recognize we made a mistake and also let go and try not to make that same mistake going forward. And the last question is, when it comes to holding on to things out of guilt, who is telling me I should keep this? And does that person care more about my happiness than keeping something out of guilt? And for that, I do have a recent episode that we did, episode 233, all about what to do with gifts that you don't want, but you're keeping out of guilt. So make sure to check that out. All right, we're on our last one. So we have MUPPET, memories, utility, possibility, pleasure, expectations. And then the last one is tomorrow. I'll get to it tomorrow. How many times we've said that? So we don't know what to do with something, or we think it's going to take too much time to kind of go through it and figure it out and deal with it. So we get these piles. It piles up for later, which is really easy to do when we have such busy lives. And when I'm working with people in their home, a lot of times I'll hear, oh, I'm just going to put that there for now. I hear that so much. I'm like, really? I don't think it's going to be for now. I think it's going to end up being forever. So let's go ahead and find a home for it. And it is kind of like an elementary concept, you think about with children, like putting things back where they belong. And I ask my kids a lot, like, where does that live? Like, do your clothes live on the floor or do they live somewhere else? And so we can ask ourselves some of these questions. Where does this item live? And if it doesn't have a home, this question comes from Dana K. White, where would I look for it first? I love this because it is really like the intuitive, like, where does my brain go? Because everyone's brain goes to a different place. So if it's a shared item, it may be helpful to ask your family members too what they think. But for anything that is just yours and your responsibility, asking yourself, where would I look for this first? And the second question is, okay, well, is it because I don't have a system around this item? And this goes to episode 222, all about my roadblock review, where you're asking, is this causing friction, frustration, or falling behind? But that can happen with our stuff too. So for example, when it comes to paper coming into the home, is it that I don't have a system? So there's friction with the fact that the paper comes home with my kids and then we're immediately doing sports or another activity. And so the paper just sits on the counter. So that kind of goes along with question number 3. Can I implement some sort of system in this area? And the big culprits are paper, just kind of throwing stuff on any kind of surface, laundry, etc. So just being able to figure out like, why isn't this working? Where can I trace it back? How can I have a system around it so I don't keep saying, oh, I'm going to get to that later, or I'm going to get to that tomorrow? And again, episode 222, all about the roadblock review, can help you with that. So those are the 6 main reasons that I see that we hold on to stuff. If I missed any and you're like, oh, well, what about this? Feel free to either connect with me on Instagram. I'm going to have a post or reel about this. Or if you are watching this on YouTube, make sure to comment below if there is something that perhaps I missed. I would love to know. And make sure to check out the show notes today for all of those related episodes so you can dive in a little deeper if you struggle with anything in particular. And besides that, I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Hey Mama, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, could you please share this episode with another mom who is feeling overwhelmed? Also, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a 5-star written review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Finally, if you would like more support, come on over to our free Facebook group, tinyurl.com/moms overcoming overwhelm. Can't wait to connect with you soon.